They laughed at her rifle first. Then they laughed at her age. Then one of them made a joke about her hands being too small to hold a weapon that mattered. She didn't respond, didn't blink, just wiped the dust off her scope with a cloth she kept folded in her breast pocket and kept her eyes on the ridge. 20 minutes later, the entire six-man SEAL team was pinned in a drainage ditch with no exit, no air support, and a kill box closing from 3 directions. And the only thing standing between them and a body bag was a 19-year-old girl they hadn't bothered to learn the name of. Now, before we show you the exact moment, she pulled the trigger that changed everything, and the words she said afterward that nobody in that unit ever forgot. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Tap subscribe, hit that bell icon, and stay right here. Because this story doesn't end where you think it does. And the people who laughed the hardest had the furthest to fall. The outpost at Kos smelled like diesel smoke and dried mud. It sat on a flat stretch of highland, just below a ridgeline that turned pink at dusk and gray at everything else. The perimeter was made of HESCO barriers and wishful thinking. 3 generators hummed at the back of the compound, and the one nearest the armory had been misfiring since Tuesday, making a sound like someone quietly tapping a wrench against a pipe, over and over, without stopping. Petty Officer First Class Damon Graves didn't love this part of Afghanistan. He didn't hate it either. After 3 deployments, he'd stopped having opinions about the terrain and focused only on the mission. That's what professionals did. That's what he told the newer guys. Keep your opinions about the landscape and save your energy for the objective. He was standing near the equipment rack when she walked in. No announcement, no escort, just a compact figure in standard-issue desert fatigues, carrying a rifle case in one hand and a small duffel in the other. She moved efficiently, not fast, not slow, just purposeful, like she'd mapped the compound in her head before she'd entered it. Graves clocked her immediately. Young, very young, skin the deep warm brown of polished mahogany, natural hair pulled back tight under a tan cap, eyes scanning the compound with a quiet intensity that didn't match the face wearing them. The rifle case was long, longer than standard. He noted that. Someone from Delta Rotation leaned over to him. Who's that? Graves squinted. No idea. Chief Petty Officer Wallace Wren appeared from behind the comms trailer. Big man, broad shoulders, 18 years of operational experience stacked behind his eyes. He looked at the new arrival the way a customs agent looks at an undeclared bag. Slow, deliberate, already deciding. You lost, he called across the yard. She didn't stop walking. Petty Officer Second Class Zara Cole, attached to ISR support, rotating in for the Kamal Basin operation. Wren folded his arms. ISR support doesn't usually bring long cases. No, she said. It doesn't. She kept walking. Found the bunk assignment on the board. Read it once. Went inside. Wren watched the door close behind her, then turned back to Graves with a look that said something between amusement and irritation. She's a kid, Graves said. She's assigned. Wren replied, which was an agreement. From across the compound, another voice floated over. Petty Officer Briggs, mouth always moving faster than his brain. They sending us babysitting duty now? She looks like she should be studying for finals. A few laughs followed. Dry, tired, the kind that came out of boredom rather than genuine humor. Nobody thought to ask what was in the case. Nobody thought they needed to. The briefing happened at 1,700 hours in the ops tent. 6 men from the SEAL element, 2 Marines from the QRF attachment, 1 signals officer, and Zara Cole, seated at the back corner, notebook open, pen moving in small, precise strokes. Nobody introduced her. Nobody made space for her. She found her own. Master Chief Owens ran the brief. 46 years old, jaw like carved stone, voice like gravel poured over concrete. He'd been in Kandahar when the towers came down. He'd been in Ramadi when the city burned. He didn't use extra words. Kamal Basin, 12 kilometers east. 3-hour window. Intelligence suggests a mid-level facilitator moving a weapons cache through the secondary road network. The team would move by vehicle to the insertion point, then on foot to the observation ridge. Confirm the movement. Document the route. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. He paused, looked around the room. Questions? Briggs raised a hand. What's the ISR element's role? Owens didn't look at his notes. Elevated position. Overwatch. Cole's your long eye. The silence that followed had texture to it. Graves felt it. Wren didn't react, which was its own kind of reaction. Briggs didn't hide his expression. She's our sniper? She's your Overwatch element, Owens said. The distinction was deliberate. He didn't elaborate. After the brief broke, the men gathered near the vehicles. Wren began the equipment check with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd done it 800 times. Zara emerged from the bunk trailer with her rifle case and positioned herself at the edge of the group to begin her own prep. She unlatched the case. The rifle inside was a .338 Lapua Magnum, custom-fitted stock, Schmidt and Bender scope, zeroed for 1,400 meters. The barrel had been cleaned, so recently the solvent smell still carried in the dry air. Briggs walked over, looked down at it, then looked at her. He had the smile of someone who'd already formed a conclusion. "That's a big rifle for small hands," he said. She didn't look up. "It fits fine. You qualified on that system?" "Yes." "Where?" "Fort Benning. Then Camp Atterbury. Then a place I'm not going to name." He paused, uncertain, then recovered. "How old are you?" "Old enough to be here." Someone snorted. Graves turned away to hide his expression, which wasn't entirely amusement. Somewhere underneath the laughter, something else moved. A flicker of something he couldn't name yet. Wren said nothing. He watched her assemble the rifle from the side, noting the pace, the sequence, the way she handled each component. He didn't say anything to anyone about what he observed. The vehicles rolled out at 1830. The desert at dusk smelled like cooling stone and something sweet from a wildflower that grew only in the shadow of the hills. The convoy moved without lights after the first kilometer, navigating by GPS and memory and the moon that hung low and pale over the eastern ridge. Zara sat in the rear vehicle, rifle case between her knees, eyes forward. She'd been assigned the rear seat not by logic, but by the unspoken social architecture of men who hadn't decided yet whether to include her. She'd taken the seat without comment. Graves was across from her. He watched her for a while, then looked away, then looked back. She was doing what experienced operators did before a mission. Nothing. Conserving. Going still inside before the world asked her to move. He found that interesting and said nothing about it. The insertion point was a dry riverbed 3 kilometers from the observation ridge. The team dismounted fast, moved into a staggered column, and began the foot movement uphill through terrain that punished every step with loose shale and sharp gradient. Zara carried the rifle system in a padded drag bag over her shoulder and kept pace without complaint. Briggs watched her once from the front of the column, waiting for a stumble, a slowdown, any confirmation of what he'd already decided about her. She didn't give him one. The ridge took 45 minutes to climb. Wren posted security. Owens established the observation position behind a natural rock shelf that gave a commanding view of the road network below. The basin spread out beneath them in pale silver moonlight, a web of unpaved tracks and scrub brush, and 3 villages whose lights were mostly dark at this hour. Zara moved to the forward edge, set up her bipod, and settled behind the scope. She began ranging landmarks with quiet efficiency. The tree line at 800 meters. The junction where the 2 roads met at 1,100. The low wall beside the abandoned irrigation channel at 1,340. Graves watched from behind her. He'd been a senior operator for 6 years. He'd worked with snipers in Iraq, in Syria, in places without names. He knew what competent looked like in the dark, and what he was watching, even in the moonlight, even in the first 3 minutes of her setup, looked competent. He didn't say that out loud. The first hour passed without contact. The road below stayed empty. The team settled into the familiar waiting rhythm of surveillance operations, slow breaths, slow movement, eyes moving but body still. Briggs got bored. Bored was dangerous with Briggs. He moved up beside Zara in a low crouch. "You see anything?" "Not yet. You've been on a live operation before this." She kept her eye on the scope. "Yes." "Real one?" "Confirm contacts." "Chief Briggs." Her voice was flat. Not annoyed. Just flat. "If you want to talk about my record, request it from command." Right now, I need you to stop moving next to me because you're creating vibration on this surface and it's affecting my reading. Silence. Briggs moved back. One of the junior operators, Petty Officer Lund, pressed his mouth together to keep something in. Graves watched the whole exchange from 3 feet away and felt the flicker again. That thing he couldn't name. Wren appeared beside him a moment later. His voice was barely above a breath. She's right about the vibration. I know, Graves said. You think Briggs knows? Briggs doesn't know a lot of things. Another hour passed. The moon moved. The basin stayed quiet. Then the intel moved. The vehicles appeared from the southern approach. 3 trucks, lights off, moving at a pace that was careful without being suspicious. Exactly the kind of movement the brief had described. Owens called a soft stand to. The team tightened. Zara adjusted her scope, tracked the lead vehicle, and began feeding range data in a quiet, steady voice. Lead vehicle, 1,100 meters. Speed approximately 20 kilometers per hour. Maintaining southern heading. Owens keyed his radio. Reported the contact to command. Requested confirmation of assets. The response came back distorted, partial. Something about weather interference over the relay station. Something about a 30-minute delay. 30 minutes. The vehicles would be through the basin and gone in 20. Owens made the call to continue observing. Document what they could. Wait for guidance. What nobody knew, what no signal had yet transmitted, what even Owens wouldn't learn until it was almost too late, was that the 3 trucks below weren't the only movement in the basin tonight. Zara knew first. Movement on the eastern ridgeline, she said. Her voice hadn't changed in pitch. 800 meters. Multiple personnel. Moving parallel to our position. Wren was beside her instantly. How many? Still counting. At least 6. Possibly 8. They're not in a patrol formation. They're in a flanking formation. The word landed like a stone in still water. Flanking. That wasn't a patrol. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a deliberate maneuver by people who knew exactly where the SEAL team was positioned on this ridge. They've been watching us come in, Graves said quietly. Owens didn't waste time on reaction. He was already directing the team to collapse the observation position and move back from the forward edge. Weapons up. Security established. The briefed objective had just become secondary. But the flanking force was faster than any of them expected. The first burst of gunfire came from directly below, not from the vehicles but from the ground level of the basin floor. A secondary element that had been waiting in the scrub brush. Hidden, patient, planned. The team hit the deck. Rock chips exploded 3 feet from Graves' head. He rolled behind a boulder, weapon up, scanning. Lund was shouting a contact report. Owens was trying to re-establish comms. Briggs had his rifle up, but couldn't acquire a target in the dark. The flanking element on the eastern ridge opened up simultaneously. Automatic fire. Short, controlled bursts. Professional. Disciplined. Not fighters improvising. Soldiers executing a plan. They had the high ground on the east. The secondary element had the low ground below. The team was caught between 2 fires on a ridge with no exit route that didn't cross open ground in one direction or the other. This was a kill box. Someone had known they were coming. Graves pressed flat behind his boulder. His mind was already running the math on their situation, and the math was not good. The flanking element would close their position in less than 4 minutes if they moved at pace. The lower element was pinning them from below. Air support was 30 minutes out at minimum. QRF was further. He heard Owens on the radio, heard the frustration in his voice. The relay station interference hadn't cleared. They were alone. In 4 minutes or less, this ridge was going to become something that got carved into a memorial stone at a base back home. Zara Cole had not moved. While the team collapsed from the forward edge, she had shifted, not backward, sideways, into a depression in the rock shelf, partially protected, still facing east. She'd repositioned her bipod in the chaos of the first contact with hands that weren't shaking. Graves registered this from the corner of his vision. He almost said something, almost told her to fall back. He didn't get the chance. Her voice cut through the noise, calm as a range instructor on a Tuesday morning. Easter element lead is at 840 meters. Moving at a run. I have a shot. Owens was in the middle of a radio transmission. He broke off. Fake it. One shot. The crack of the .338 Lapua was different from the incoming fire. Deeper, more deliberate, like a door closing rather than a window breaking. The movement on the eastern ridge stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Silence from that direction for 2 full seconds. Then the flanking element changed behavior. They scattered, broke formation. Some dropped into cover. The disciplined, coordinated advance collapsed into individual responses as the men who'd been following a leader processed the fact that the leader was suddenly not there anymore. 840 meters. In the dark. On a moving target. With incoming fire still hitting the rock face around her position. Graves found himself staring at the back of her head. She was already ranging the next target. Secondary contact. Eastern element. 790 meters. Moving right. Fake it. Owens said again. Faster this time. Second shot. The flanking element went from 8 active shooters to 6. Then to 6 who no longer understood what was happening to them. What followed was not a Hollywood sequence. It wasn't fast or clean or accompanied by music. It was 10 minutes of brutal, grinding, terrifying work, crammed into a ridge that smelled like burned propellant and fierce sweat, with rock fragments raining down and radio static filling the gaps between gunfire. Zara Cole fired 6 times. 6 times in 10 minutes. Not rapid fire. Not panic fire. Controlled, spaced, each one preceded by a quiet range call and a breath that she let out halfway before she squeezed. After the 4th shot, the lower element below the basin began repositioning. They'd expected the team to be suppressed, unable to fight back, and now something was removing their coordination at range. They didn't know what. They couldn't see where it was coming from. After the 5th shot, the eastern ridge went quiet. After the 6th, the lower element broke contact entirely. They retreated toward the vehicles. One of the trucks tried to leave and stalled in the soft ground near the irrigation channel. The other 2 made it out. The basin went still. The silence that fell over the ridge was the kind that comes after something irreversible. Not peaceful, just final. Graves realized he'd been holding his breath and slowly let out. Lund was checking himself for wounds. Briggs was pressed behind a rock 4 feet away, weapon still raised at a ridgeline that was no longer shooting. Owens had finally gotten through to command. His voice on the radio was tight and controlled. Wren was the first one who moved toward Zara. She was still behind the rifle, still watching the eastern ridge through the scope, making sure, not celebrating, not trembling, not waiting to be told she'd done well. Just working. Wren crouched beside her. He looked at the ridgeline, looked at her, then back at the ridgeline. 6 rounds, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. 6 shots, she corrected. Not a boast. Just precision. There's a difference between rounds and shots that matters to a sniper. He nodded once. Good glass work. Thank you, Chief. She began breaking down the scope, methodical, sequence by sequence, the same way she'd built it up. Like the last 10 minutes had been a training exercise, and it was time to clean the equipment and log the results. Graves watched from 6 feet away, and the thing he hadn't been able to name all night finally had a name. He felt it the first time he saw her in the compound. That flicker of something underneath the certainty of his assumptions. He'd felt it when she told Briggs about the vibration. He'd felt it when she didn't flinch at the first contact. It was recognition. The specific, humbling recognition of someone who knows they've been wrong. The extraction took 90 minutes. QRF came in from the west, secured the basin floor, recovered equipment from the stalled truck that turned out to carry not weapons, but communications gear. A communications facilitator. A different kind of target, a more important kind, the kind whose network would take months to rebuild. The SEAL team rode back in silence. Not the silence of exhaustion. The silence of recalibration. Briggs sat across from Zara in the rear vehicle and didn't say a word for the first 40 minutes. His hands rested on his knees. He looked at the floor, the ceiling, the window, anywhere that wasn't her direction. Then, somewhere in the dark between the basin and the outpost, he spoke. How long have you been shooting competitively? She looked at him, not surprised, not warm, just looking. Since I was 11, she said. Junior Nationals at 13. Army Marksmanship Unit at 17. Sniper school 2 weeks after I turned 19. He nodded, slowly, like each piece of information was settling somewhere it hadn't expected to land. That last shot, he said. 790 meters. Moving target. In the dark. 780, she corrected. He'd closed distance. He was quiet again for a moment. I'm going to say something, and I need you to know I mean it. She waited. I was wrong about you. I was wrong from the first minute, and what I said about your hands was disrespectful and stupid, and I'm sorry. The vehicle hit a bump. The moon was fully up now, flooding the desert in that cold flat light that made everything look like it had been made in another century. Zara looked at him for 2 full seconds. Then she nodded once. Okay, she said. Not forgiven, not forgotten, just received. Like a report filed. Noted. Accurate. Briggs seemed to understand that was all he was going to get. He turned back to the window. In the front seat, Graves had heard everything. The debrief happened at 0200 in the ops tent. Owens ran it with the same flat precision he ran every debrief. Contact, response, withdrawal, outcome. He went through each sequence without editorializing. Graves had been in 100 of these rooms, with 100 different teams, after 100 different operations. This one felt different. When Owens reached the Overwatch element's actions, he stopped. He looked down at his notes. Then he looked up. 6 fires from the Overwatch position, he said. 6 confirmed contacts. Eastern flanking element neutralized before it could close to effective range. Had that element completed its movement, we would have been engaged from 2 directions simultaneously on open terrain with no cover to the west. He paused. The Overwatch element's actions were the deciding factor in the team's ability to disengage successfully. Nobody spoke. Owens looked directly at Zara. That's in the report. As written. Under your name. She gave no expression. No smile. No look of satisfaction. Just a single nod. Wren raised his hand. For the record, Chief. She also called the initial flanking movement before anyone else had eyes on it. That gave us 60 seconds we needed to get our heads out of the observation position before the low element opened up. Owens wrote something. Didn't look up. Also noted, the debrief continued for another 20 minutes. When it ended, men filed out slowly, the heavy shuffle of people who hadn't slept and had recently been shot at. Lund stopped beside Zara at the 10 exit. He was 22, young for the unit, the youngest before tonight. Hey, he said. She looked at him. He paused. Reset. I didn't say anything when Briggs made that comment earlier. About your hands. And I should have. She studied him. Why didn't you? He was honest about it. Because I didn't know you yet. She considered that. It was, she decided, a fair answer. Ignorance wasn't the same as malice. There were different problems requiring different responses. Do you know me now? She asked. He looked at her for a moment, then at the door, then back. I know you don't, miss, he said. She almost smiled. Almost. No, she agreed. I don't. He nodded once and walked out. The outpost at Kost was quiet in the hour before dawn. Generators hummed. The misfiring one near the armory had finally been fixed, the tapping sound gone, replaced by a steady mechanical breath. Stars hung low and bright over the ridgeline, the same ridgeline that had looked empty all day and nearly swallowed them whole by night. Graves found her at the equipment cleaning station behind the bunk trailer. She had the rifle broken down in front of her, cleaning each component with the same cloth she'd used on the scope during the long wait before the mission. Methodical, patient, same as everything else she did. He sat down on the opposite bench without asking. She didn't object. For a while, neither of them said anything. He watched her work. The way her hands moved over the barrel was the way someone moves over something they've known long enough to trust. Not cautious, fluent. How long have you known you could do this? He finally asked. She looked up, not at him, at the question, like she was weighing it. Since I was 11, she said. First time I pulled a trigger, and the target moved exactly the way I calculated. I knew then it was the thing I was built for. And you didn't want to do something else? Something. He paused, choosing the word. Quieter. This is quiet, she said. She meant it. He thought about that. The men laughed at you today, he said. Before the mission. Yes. Did that bother you? She set down the component she was holding. looked at him directly for the first time in the conversation. Her eyes were the kind of brown that looked almost black in dim light. "It used to," she said. "When I was younger, I wanted to correct it, explain it, prove it immediately." She picked the component back up. "I don't anymore." "Why not?" "Because the truth has its own timeline. You can't rush it and you can't stop it." She held the component up, checked it against the light. Tonight was proof of that. Graves was quiet for a while. "I didn't laugh," he said, "but I didn't say anything either. When Briggs made that comment." "I know. That's not much better." "No," she agreed. "It isn't." He nodded. "Deserve that." "I'm sorry." She looked at him, held a look for a moment. "I know you are," she said. "I could tell from the way you watch me work. People who think you're nothing don't study your technique." He hadn't known she'd noticed that. He shouldn't have been surprised. "You're 19 years old," he said. Not as a challenge this time. Almost like he was just processing the fact. "In 3 months," she corrected. "Still 18. He shook his head slowly. She resumed cleaning. The generator hummed. The stars moved by their imperceptible degree. "Graves," she said after a while. "Yeah." "The next time someone underestimates someone in your unit," she said, "say something." He thought about that. Thought about the 6 fires from the ridgeline. About the 4 minutes the flanking element would have needed to close them off. About the math of what the night would have added up to without those 6 shots. "Yeah," he said. "I will." She nodded once. Small. Final. And returned to the rifle. 3 days later, the after-action report from the Kamal Basin operation was filed with Joint Special Operations Command. Classified at the appropriate level, accessible to the appropriate personnel. It contained, among other things, a citation for outstanding performance under fire by Petty Officer 2nd Class Zara Cole, noting specifically her early identification of the flanking element, her controlled fire discipline under direct threat, and her successful neutralization of hostile forces at range without injury to the supported element. The report noted her age. The reviewing officer circled it with a pen. Not to question it, just to mark it. The way you mark something that surprises you and teaches you something you should have already known. In the armory at the Costa outpost, on the wall where teams sometimes left small markers of operations past, someone had pinned a single rifle cartridge to the board. A .338 Lapua, cleaned and polished until it caught the light. Nobody wrote a name under it. Nobody needed to, because in that outpost, in that team, in that particular group of men who had ridden up a ridge with assumptions stacked higher than their equipment and come back down with fewer of them, the name was already known. And the lesson attached to it wasn't about marksmanship, though the marksmanship had been extraordinary. The lesson was simpler and harder and the kind that doesn't wash off. It was this: the most dangerous thing you can do in a combat zone isn't to underestimate the enemy. It's to underestimate the person standing next to you. Because on a ridge in Cost on a night when the moon was low and the basin was a trap, the 6-man team that laughed at an 18-year-old girl's rifle went home because that 18-year-old girl refused to miss. Not because she had something to prove. She'd stopped needing to prove things the first time she pulled a trigger and understood exactly what she was built for. She went home too, by the way. Unhurried. Clean rifle. Same cloth in her breast pocket. Like it had been another Tuesday. Have you ever watched someone get completely written off before they'd even had the chance to speak? And have you ever seen the exact moment the room realized it had gotten everything wrong? The question isn't really about rifles or ridgelines. It's about this: what do we lose when we let assumptions speak before people get the chance to? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Every single one gets read. If this story hit you somewhere real, hit that like button and subscribe with the bell icon on. Because we tell these stories every day about the people who were counted out and showed up anyway. Share this with someone who's been underestimated. Tell them Zara says hello. And since you're already here, your next mission is already on screen. Don't wait. Go watch it now. We'll see you tomorrow.